Welcome to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. Later in the show, Stephanie Mitchell, owner of Mod Sani, will stop by the studio, and Lanasha chats with Miss Indian Rodeo 2023, Sharaya, Edgewater. But right now, Lanasha speaks with Yolanda Francisco-Nez, Executive Director of Restoring Ancestral Winds.
I'm host Lanasha Puati. On the phone with me is Yolanda Francisco-Nez, Executive Director of Restoring Ancestral Winds, offering direct service to domestic violence and sexual assault Native American survivors in Utah. Hello, Yolanda. It's an honor to have you on our show today.
Hi, this is Yolanda. Great to meet you all. Great to be part of this program today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And please kick things off for us with an introduction of yourself, Indigenous heritage, and your story.
Absolutely. My name is Yolanda Francisco-Nez, and I am as you said, Director of Restoring Ancestral Winds. I am from the Navajo Nation, and I was born in Fort Defiance, Arizona, and I am so happy to be part of today's program.
And can you tell us more? We can dive in and learning more about your Restoring Ancestral Winds.
Absolutely. You know, Restoring Ancestral Winds was formally established in the state of Utah back in 2014, and the way that it was established was really interesting. Part of our history includes regular meetings with the governor of the state of Utah at that time. That tribal leaders often meet with him, and back then there were a group of advocates, victim advocates, who were in the room when the issue of violence against Native people had come up. And in that room was a former director of a domestic violence coalition that was up in northern Utah. And a few of the women got together along with some other victim advocates from the different 7 tribes that we have here, and formed Restoring Ancestral Winds as a result of some of the information that had been shared during that time. It was a major undertaking. It did take them about 2 years to get established, and luckily at that time there was a funding source that came out of the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women that was specifically funding for tribal coalitions across the country, and that source has been the primary funder for our coalition, and we are one of 20. So yeah, that is how Restoring Ancestral Winds got its footing.
And can you give us an overview of historical trauma and how it has affected Indigenous peoples?
Absolutely. You know, we probably could spend the duration of this interview on historical trauma. For those who are unfamiliar with what that all encompasses in, you know, the theory of historical trauma was developed to kind of explain what the current problems are, social problems primarily facing Native people. And the theory purports that some Native Americans are experiencing historical loss symptoms, meaning, for example, depression, substance dependence, diabetes, dysfunctional parenting, unemployment, as a result of the cross-generational transmission of trauma from historical losses. And those historical losses include, you know, loss of population, land, and culture. I would include also language in that. However, you know, there's definitely some debate by mental health professionals about the validity of this particular concept. But if you are a member of an Indigenous community and you have been born and grown up and experienced life among Native people, it's clear that there is a definite correlation in the Native American experience, that these symptoms, so to speak, are very real, a very real part of who we are. And so, one thing that has been talked about often is that, the psychological needs of our Native people, who are experiencing, the psychological distress, and end up having, poor overall physical and mental health, and often unmet medical and psychological needs. So what you have is, suicide rates for Native American adults and youth that are higher than the national average, with suicide being, the second leading cause of death for Native Americans from the age of 10 to 34. And so when you think about we have over 566 federally recognized tribes living in 35 states, and you think about those numbers of especially more than 60% of Native people now living in urban areas, you would hope that among them there are those who have adequate professionals who have a good, solid understanding of what historical trauma is and how that affects the daily life of the people, particularly those who, we just had gone through the height of the pandemic. What we saw is that so many people, we saw an increase of domestic violence when there was a loss of income in the home due to COVID. So, and then we have really some more understanding, I would say, within the last few years about what Native people have experienced as a result of boarding schools, and some of the atrocities that have been brought to light around the boarding school experience, which contributed to that loss that I mentioned earlier when we're talking about, the transmission of trauma from historical losses, loss of population, land, culture, and language. And so some of those are also contributing factors to how we look at domestic violence and violence experienced by Native Americans, both by dominant European cultures who brought very specific ways of living and were forced to conduct intentional murder of Native Americans and exposing our people to European diseases, for example, smallpox and diphtheria and measles and cholera. And so, yeah, those are definitely kind of some examples of the overview of historical trauma. And I think that it's been really good to be more informed about how that historical trauma, while there may be a debate among mental health professionals, it's very real to the people. And so it's kind of I think it's been great to have so much information now, have good learning about it so that we can be informed in how we go forward and how we develop strategies around how to address these types of trauma.
Oh, yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Yolanda. And Yolanda, going to the Restoring Ancestral Winds, about your services, do you guys offer any classes or workshops?
So we do have a trainer here in our office, and we conduct trainings all throughout, not only professional development training among law enforcement, court, and attorneys, but also community training and informing people about typically the types of domestic violence that exist. More recently, within the last year or so, we have done a significant amount of training around healing from trauma. And the training comes from Moroni Benali and his father, who did a significant amount of research on the topic. And it comes from a Navajo worldview. And this has been one of our most popular workshops that has been given to, for instance, especially those who are in the mental health field, mental health professionals who work directly with Native people full time. The training is offered many times, most times at no cost, and it goes deep into not only how to help people heal from trauma and address it from a mental health perspective, but also looking at multiple quadrants of healing that encompass the spiritual, psychological, physical parts of a human being in how they address trauma, and it really delves deep into, I would say specifically around historical trauma and understanding what that means for Native communities. But as I was mentioning earlier, it comes from a Navajo worldview, as both researchers are Navajo, and it really has been one of our most popular pieces of training that we often get requests for.
And can you let us know more about the direct services you offer with domestic violence? Can you also give us a brief overview of the different types of domestic violence?
Sure. I did want to share that Restoring Ancestral Winds does not offer direct service to victims of violence, but we often do get phone calls to do that. What we offer is technical assistance, training, and policy and advocacy with tribes who are offering that direct service to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And next year, we will be announcing a helpline. Basically, it will serve as a resource line for tribal members who are experiencing violence, and they can call this particular number, and will have a list of domestic violence shelters in their area, and also a list of professionals who offer specific services to tribal members. For instance, some of our communities have a sexual assault nurse examiner who works with members of tribes, and we will be able to give those numbers out. And then we also will have a list of resources. For instance, housing seems to be one of those issues that is often creating a barrier for folks who are experiencing domestic violence in their home. And we will have also resources for folks who need to go and stay in a hotel. We will have connections to a wide range of resources which will be offered to people who call the helpline. There are many different types of domestic violence. When people mention what is domestic violence, sometimes even knowing what domestic violence is and what that encompasses is helpful. People who in our communities who are experiencing it but don't have the word for it is even helpful to know, what types of domestic violence exists. The one that we most often recognize as domestic violence is physical abuse. When it's visual and you can see that there is harm, physical harm done to an individual, that is one type of domestic violence. And the other is sexual abuse, is also another form. Emotional abuse and intimidation, isolation, verbal abuse like coercion, threats, and blame. there's also economic abuse, which we're hearing more and more of, the economic abuse where you may have the head of the household be the only income earner in the home, and also the person who is being abusive by withholding withholding the money and not allowing the partner to have access to that, and using the financial income that's coming into the home and not sharing that with the partner or the family. And so the other two pieces of types of abuse can also be using male privilege. And using male privilege, a lot of this has been talked about through the Me Too movement. We see that also as a form of domestic violence. There are places where, as a culture, whether that be in the workplace, historically, you can see that there was a time when it was acceptable. People tolerated the use of male privilege, and male privilege is something that men primarily benefit from, and they will often enjoy that domination over women and will reinforce it among each other. And what happens is that women often will suffer as a consequence of this type of violence, and being secretive and applying sexism really becomes a form of violence against women. And we have seen, particularly with some of our tribal government institutions, I'm thinking of an example that was shared by a Navajo Nation Council delegate, Amber Kanazba-Crotty, who had experienced this during her leadership very early on, when she was also abused by a colleague. And I think the more that we talk about this, and the more that we talk about how society objectifies women and what that looks like for our native people, I think having an understanding about that and having an awareness about the fact that this is wrong, and we don't want to condone and perpetuate the violence that has existed, and want to stop that. And so that's another form of violence. And of course, overall, in what is seen in domestic violence is the use of power and control, and the controlling behavior by any individual is one way that an abuser can maintain their dominance over a person who would be a victim. And the controlling behavior is something that is a core issue in all these forms of violence. Sometimes it can be, many times it can be subtle, but it's always insidious and pervasive. And some of those controls we see take place, I see it even on social media. And there are ways and examples of that power and control that often people who don't have a clear understanding of what power and control encompasses see it as the norm. For instance, doing things like constantly calling the partner in the workplace and wanting to know where they are and who they're with, and forcing and encouraging a victim to make them believe that they're incapable of surviving without them, without the controller. And also another thing that we have seen, of course, is using children to control the victim parent by using their children as like spies, having them share information about where did you go with mom, and what were you doing, who were you with, who did you see, who was mom talking to, or the person who's the abuser will threaten even to harm the children and use that as a form of control over the partner. That's kind of my long answer to what types of control or what types of domestic violence exists.
And can you let us know how can our listeners learn more about restoring ancestral winds, and how can they contact you if they have further questions?
Sure. You can find Restoring Ancestral Winds online at our website at restoringawcoalition.org. And on our website, you can also find all of our contact information. Our number is kind of long if people are prepared to write that down. It's 435-356-6161.
Do you have any social media outlets?
Yes, we do. Our most active page is on Facebook. We also are active on Instagram and Twitter.
Perfect. Well, I would like to thank you, Yolanda, for taking time out to talk to us today, to tell us more about restoring ancestral winds and also telling us more about domestic violence.
Thank you so much for having us today.
Coming up, Lanasha talks with Stephanie Mitchell, owner of Mod Sani. Support for KRDP 90.7 FM comes in part from Native Health, with 2 locations in Phoenix, 4041 North Central Avenue, Building C, near the corner of Central Avenue and Indian School Road, and at 2423 West Dunlap Avenue. Native Health is also located in Mesa at 777 West Southern Avenue, near the corner of Southern Avenue and Extension Road. Native Health provides primary medical, dental, behavioral health, WIC, and wellness services for the urban Native American community. For more information, call 602-279-5262 or visit our webpage at nativehealthphoenix.org.
Welcome back to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. I'm host Lanasha Puwadi. Stephanie Mitchell is the owner of Mod Sani, Navajo-infused products ranging from vapor rub to beard oil. Hello, Stephanie. It's an honor to have you on our show today.
Hi, it's an honor to be here. I'm excited to talk about our business today.
Yes, and before we get started, can you tell us about yourself and your Indigenous heritage?
Yeah, so my name's Stephanie Mitchell. I am originally from Fort Defiance, Arizona. I am Navajo, and I grew up in Fort Defiance, so...
Oh, wow, that is awesome. And tell us more about your business, Mod Sani.
Yeah, so Mod Sani, Mod is abbreviated for modern, and Sani is Navajo for elder woman, which is where we get all of our traditions, our knowledge, and everything that's passed down from us. And it was really a joke between me and my mom. We went to Flagstaff for a farmer's market, just passing through, and then I seen other people doing natural products, and I'm like, what's more natural than native herbs?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of put my spin on it because my grandmother was very, very traditional Navajo, just Tedadine and prayers and things like that. So just growing up, I was always around her teachings and her philosophy of being Navajo. So that's kind of where it came from. We're just joking around. I'm like, oh, I think I can do this. And about, I think a year and a half later is where we're at today. Now it's just grown. It's kind of like taken off and blown my mind and my mom's mind. We're like, oh my God, we're just talking about this and now people know who we are. It's funny because I'm like, oh my God, people believe in us. And it's kind of, it's kind of surreal in a way. Even I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, it just came from like one joke. This all came from. It's so funny.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. And how did it all get started? Like, what was the process? Did you have like a trial and error with different, like creating your products?
YouTube. Everything was YouTube. So I did a lot. Well, I have a background in a little bit of engineering and things like that. So I've always been excited to just try, just error after error, and constantly figuring out how to like seep the oils, seep the herbs, and figuring out how to even seep the herbs was interesting. Mm-hmm. And it was because I think the biggest takeaway for me is when like the younger generation, they come up to my booth or wherever I'm selling and they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do this, or mm-hmm. and they think it's like the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, oh my God, Gen Z thinks I'm cool. So I'm just excited to just really embrace our traditional heritage and giving it to the young people and letting them know that it's, you know, it's possible to do new things with the old ways, basically.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So from there, it's just really, it just grew from there. Just the uniqueness of our products and just really being encouraged by the Native community. So, you know, it's just really all of them, you know, encouraging and making me push myself to create products from my own knowledge, basically. So, you know, just have to, that's where it really came from.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That is awesome. And where do you get your Navajo herbs? Do you grow them or do you kind of just find them?
So I get everything from back home. We have our cornfields in Blue Canyon area. So it's a little bit about 30 minutes from Fort Defiance. That's where we grow all of our own family, corn, squash, things like that, and everything that just vegetates out there. So we gather the sage, we gather the Navajo tea, the pine sap, all of the cedar, juniper berries, everything grows out there. So, and we try our best to not ever collect anything near a road or that has anything that's been like congested or touched, really. So, you know, we go out and we basically got to hike, but it's worth it in the end.
Oh, wow. And do you have a brick and mortar location where you create your products?
So I do everything out of my home right now. This coming year, we're hoping to maybe get like not a storefront, but like a office basically to make the products in bigger quantities.
Yeah.
Because we just doing everything kind of makeshift right now. And we just want to really expand more this year. So that's what we're going to do.
Oh, that's awesome. I bet your home smells like a lot of different auras and just
my
smells
family,
fantastic.
My family joke, like, well, Nabos can't take nothing seriously. So they're always like, oh, you're going to go to your meth lab today? And I'm like, no. I was like, so I'm like, I hope it smells good. So.
And are you the only one that kind of creates all of these, or do you involve your family as well?
So my family is heavily involved, especially like my mom, my sister, her children, and my brother and even his best friend have helped me along this journey. Like this past holiday season, my brother's best friend came down and helped us with the markets. And he's like a little brother to me as well. So it's just a very big a team that goes behind it. It came from, you know, my family just being so super supportive, and once I got everything down to where it needed to be, to where I can say, you know, this is how this goes and this is what you do and this is how you put this together, and then from there, you know, they just, you know, help out and put the time in and help me. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. I'm glad you're able to have that big support system as well with you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some more about your products that are available, and also are they available like online and or like in stores or outdoor events like powwows?
Yeah, so we haven't really done any powwows, but we can be found at Native Art Market, inspired by Denebazad, and on our website, modsanillc.com, we'll have all of our products listed, and we'll also have a schedule of where we can be found that month, like the different markets we're going to be attending, and we have our most popular one is our Che Vapor Rub. It's our twist on the classic Vicks. So sage, well, we use a sage brush, and we don't burn sage. And it's funny because it wasn't until I got into college that I see people burning sage because we boil it and drink it for tea for when we're sick or have allergies and things like that. So we applied that to a vapor rub for like the cold, flu, sinuses, and then we mix it with peppermint and eucalyptus, and we try our best to make everything local Arizona. So we get our beeswax for the base from a beekeeper in Glendale as well. So we try to keep everything as natural as possible, and down to our containers, where our containers are glass. So we try our best to make everything a really good product and everything natural, and just try to keep everything fresh and healthy.
Oh, wow. And do you have a favorite product?
So my favorite product that we do is one of our more unique products. It's a Navajo tea moisturizing salve. So we steep the Navajo tea in sweet almond oil, and we make it into a moisturizer. And I like it because I'm always washing my hands due to making the products, and especially like during COVID is when I really started making the products, because we didn't like to go to the store or anything, and everything was locked down. We had like curfew and things like that.
Yes.
It was a crazy time. And then another reason why we created this this company is because of my son. He's a nonverbal autistic child, and there's just different things that set off his like neuron receptors to where he becomes very, very sensitive to things like processed foods, artificial colorings, even like lactose and things like that. So we really started reevaluating our lives, and the best way we could do it was going back to our traditional foods, going back to, using sage when he got sick, using cedar when he had like rashes or something, or pine sap. And so that's really what was like the backbone of our company, was creating things for my son to use so that it's more natural and that it wouldn't really affect him too much. So, and then from there too is where I was like, I wish more people knew this, because my grandma was a very rare commodity to come by, and I didn't really understand that or know that until she passed. And I would talk to people, and they would be like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And for me, my grandma was always there. My grandma was always the one to go to, and I didn't really realize that other people didn't have that. That not everybody had a Mod Sani, not everybody had a Che to talk to. And so for me, and through our social media, I started these Mod Sani lessons where I talk about just the different tidbits that my grandma would talk to me about or yell at me about. Or she'd be like, "You don't do this, you don't do that." And I explain it to the best of my abilities, because I think that's what really helps people understand. And once people understand things, it's less scary. And I find that out about like natural products as well. Like people are so used to the Vicks, but they don't understand that like the concentrated menthol that's used in it is harmful, the petroleum, the chemicals, the different things like that. Even like the plastic containers can seep into the products. And so it's just different things like that. You have to make things familiar to people. And I think we do that pretty good with our products, and just explaining just the different ways and different properties. Like going back to the Navajo tea salve, Navajo tea is actually a wild chamomile, and that's what really helps people with like eczema, dry skin, and just different things like that. And so it's a really good moisturizer.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. And you mentioned the like the Mod Sani stories and also the kind of the background of your products. Do you ever talk about that like on your Instagram, your social medias, like to educate other people on why you use those products?
Yeah, I usually do. I haven't been doing that too often, but just because of the holiday season is crazy. But I'm actually going to be running for autism awareness in May. It's called the Cocodona 250.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be running that, and while I'm running that, I'll be sharing my experiences with my son's autism and our company and just the different things we do. Just even being Dene, just different tidbits and stuff like that. So I kind of took a break from my company for the past, I think, week.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to, get into the new year and really focusing in on, sharing my journey and because I'm a very private person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard for me to, talk about things. But once I, like, for example, when I shared about my son being autistic, then I got like all these people coming up to me and telling me like, oh, my son's autistic too, and my daughter's autistic. And so it's like I have to make myself uncomfortable in that way in order to help other people. So I'm like, I can be uncomfortable for a little bit if it's going to help somebody out. And so, yeah, it's just a really big year coming, I think.
Well, that's awesome. And speaking of the big year, do you have any new products that you plan to work on next year, or is there any other products you are hoping to bring to your company?
Right now, I think we are just focusing on rebranding, making everything a little bit more cohesive. Our products are where they need to be right now for the upcoming year. I think it's just more of the business side that we're going to be focusing on and kind of locking that down, especially with we're going to be having a new logo, a new website, and all of our products are going to look not very different, but just more cohesive, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That is awesome. And finally, how can our listeners learn more about Mod Sani, and how can they contact you if they have further questions?
Yeah, so our website is going to be www.modsanillc.com. And on our website, you can find the links to our social media. It's just Mod Sani LLC. If you search us on Instagram, you can just put Mod Sani in. We're the only Mod Sani, so not to brag, but and we can be found at Native Art Market in Scottsdale. And we can be found in Inspired by Denebazad as well.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. Well, I'd like to thank you, Stephanie, for taking time out to talk to us today to tell us more about your background and also of your company, Mod Sani.
Yeah, it was great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Up next, Lanasha chats with Sharaya Edgewater, Miss Indian Rodeo 2023. Support for KRDP 90.7 FM comes in part from Native Health, with 2 locations in Phoenix, 4041 North Central Avenue, Building C, near the corner of Central Avenue and Indian School Road, and at 2423 West Dunlap Avenue. Native Health is also located in Mesa at 777 West Southern Avenue. Native Health's family health advocates can help you enroll, renew, or update your access information. This can be done in person, on the phone, or via Zoom, days, nights, or weekends. It's fast, easy, and can make a difference in keeping your health care coverage. For more information, call 602-279-5262.
Welcome back to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. I'm host Lanasha Pawadi. On the phone with me is Miss Indian Rodeo 2023, Sharaya Edgewater. Hello, Sharaya. It's an honor to have you on our show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as the 2023 Miss Indian Rodeo? Can you tell us where you're from and about your Indigenous heritage?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Sharaya Edgewater. Most people know me as Rhea, and I am the 2023 Miss Indian Rodeo and official ambassador for the INFR. I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry in May 2020, and I am currently pursuing my Master's in Public Health. Originally, I am from Gracewood Springs, Arizona, and a member of the Navajo Nation. So my journey to become Miss Indian Rodeo began mid-year of 2021. I had spent the last couple of years away from rodeo and decided that in 2022, I was going to return to my rodeo roots. I attended the 2021 INFR as a spectator and made goals of competing the following year. The majority of my 2022 season was spent practicing my horsemanship and preparing for the contest with the help of my family.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So to get started, can you tell us when did you start riding horses and participating in rodeos?
Absolutely. So I began riding horses at a pretty young age. I didn't start competing until I was about 8 years old in the barrel racing event at either local rodeos, junior rodeos, and barrel racing jackpots.
And can you give us some of basics behind rodeo?
Rodeo is a equestrian event that involves horse and some other livestock. As a sport that is designed to test the horsemanship, ranch work, and the speed of cowboys and cowgirls, which this kind of evolved over time as ranch. We want to showcase our work in a sporting event, so this is how it evolved.
And can you tell us about participating in rodeo, like who is eligible, and can you tell us more about the different programs?
So males and females and children can compete in rodeos. However, there are specific events for males and females, and there are also associations that divide age groups for all kids to compete. There are 7 major events that take place in the sport of rodeo, which is bareback riding, steer wrestling, bull riding, tie-down roping, team roping, barrel racing, and saddle bronc riding. The only female event of those 7 is barrel racing. In addition to these other events, we also have minor or semi-minor events that can take place depending on the rodeo, such as breakaway roping, pole bending, and go tying, which these 3 are also mainly female events. There are many different associations throughout the United States. The professional rodeos are sanctioned by the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association and the Women's Professional Rodeo Association, while other associations are governed or associated by Children's High School, Collegiate, and other amateur or semi-professional rodeos. The Professional Association for Indian Rodeo is Indian National Finals Rodeo, and this is the event that I compete in. And to be eligible to compete in the INFR, you must be Native American Indian and must show proof of Native American Indian heritage in order to be a member and compete.
And I know earlier you had mentioned that you started competing when you were 8 years old. What would you say is the optimal age to start participating in rodeos?
I would say there's no ideal time or optimal age to start participating in rodeos. However, with age comes maturity, better mobility, and knowledge, which can definitely be an asset in the sport of rodeo. So we're luckily this event has an age system to where you can start in junior rodeo and move up as you get older. But like at the professional level, definitely with age comes that maturity and knowledge.
And can you tell us more about the categories that you participate in?
I primarily participate in the barrel racing event, but there was a time in my life where I competed in breakaway, pole bending, and goat tying.
And do you do participants bring their own horses to compete?
I would say most participants bring and use their own horses when they can. However, on long drives, just depending on the circumstances as well, you can share animals. For example, if you come to an event and your horse gets injured and you can't run on them, then you can share or borrow. Or there are some cases where you travel long distance and you go with multiple people, then it would be useful to just take a couple horses and share that. But it definitely depends on the circumstance. I would say, however, most people would prefer to use their own animals, especially if they spent the most time and practice and building that connection with their animals.
And they spent the most time like training them as well for
Yes,
their specific
absolutely.
competing. How much preparation goes into competing in a rodeo?
I would say a lot of preparation goes into competing at rodeos, and I'm not just talking about the practice you have to put in to your event or your animal and yourself, but also with planning the long drives, entering these rodeos, and taking time off from work or school and making sure everything goes smoothly just to compete, such as, for example, making sure your tire's up to date. You don't want any mishaps on your way to these events.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your title as the 2023 Miss Indian Rodeo? Does the Miss Indian Rodeo tour or provide education?
Mm-hmm. So there is no official tour for the Miss Indian Rodeo. However, I try my best to attend most of the tour rodeos throughout North America and the First Nations of Canada that the INFR rodeos put up. As Miss Indian Rodeo, I represent Indian Professional Rodeo, and it is my goal to be a community leader, promote the sport of rodeo, and promote the Western and Indigenous ways of life. This is mostly done through providing some form of education and information about this type of lifestyle.
And how is the title Miss Indian Rodeo seen as a role model?
Miss Indian Rodeo is seen as a role model by portraying good sportsmanship, high morale, and ethical character and kindness. I also promote higher education for my people.
And can you tell us more about the application process and the deadlines that go into rodeo?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So the rodeo application process and deadlines depend entirely on the association, and they can vary. For the INFR, you need to have your INFR membership or permit to compete at tour rodeos, and these tour rodeos you have to enter 2 weeks prior to the scheduled event.
Do you have any favorite success stories?
For me personally, my favorite success story isn't mine to tell, but if I had a success story, it will be of someone whom I haven't met, but I will have influenced, or who I have impacted that led them to become successful.
And let's circle back to what you're doing now besides the 2023 Miss Indian Rodeo. How do you incorporate your love of animals and horses in everyday life?
I like to think of my horses and animals as not just a friend or a pet, but more as a partner. They have been my livelihood, much like I've supplied shelter and protection for them. Having animals have taught me many life lessons, such as responsibility, hard work, and listening to your instincts. Most importantly, they have taught me that life is too short and that we should live in the moment. Animals tend to live focused on the moment, while as humans, we are often distracted from thoughts of our future and about the past. And although I have many goals for 2023, I know the present moment is always what is most important to me.
And finally, how can our listeners learn more about Miss Indian Rodeo, and how can they contact you if they have further questions?
Absolutely. So I am reached most easily through the Miss Indian Rodeo Instagram account, as I manage that account primarily. Miss Indian Rodeo has a Facebook account as well, although that is shared with the Miss Indian Rodeo pageant coordinator. So I'm not very able to look all that into or respond to many people on there, but I can kind of see what's going on.
Well, would like to thank you, Sharaya, for taking time out to talk to us today to tell us more about your title of Miss Indian Rodeo 2023, and also giving us the background and the basics behind rodeo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and 90.7 FM KRDP. Our executive producer is Susan Levy. Sound engineer is Javier Quiroga, and our host is Lanasha Puadi. We hope you will tune in again next week. If you have any questions, please reach us at nativetalkaz@listen2krdp.com.